Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week's races are actually completely recycled from the 3 races that we had 5 months ago. It's really weird. I don't know the last time they did something like this, but it's completely recycled. The only difference though is the BOP, which does make it a different meta car and a different anti-meta car, so at least we had a little bit of fun with that. Let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is the Aston Martin V12 Vantage. I'd cue that James Bond music if it didn't get me a copyright strike. In my opinion, this is the best handling of the FR cars, and it is the second fastest FR car on the leaderboard as of now, that is. That could have changed because it's been a few hours since I set the lap, but you'll see on the leaderboard how well we did. As of Tuesday evening, there are only 3 non-MR cars on the top 100. Iceman set a really good time. I'm right behind him in the Aston Martin, and there's also a GTR a little bit behind us. The Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Audi are all the meta cars in my opinion. I think the Porsche is probably the best out of all of them, but essentially if you want to win, you got to use an MR unless you're going to attack it with the anti-meta car. The very first turn comes up really quick and it is extremely tricky. In order to minimize the amount of steering you have to do, follow the curb as it diverts from the main white line. As soon as you've got enough room by going as far as you can without going over the white line, that's when you want to be turning in. I like to stay fully on the throttle until we approach the corner, and then we lift off just to tuck it in and make sure that we don't go all the way in the grass. But with that said, if you feel that you have good enough car control, you can dip your tires in the grass and actually floor it as you go over, inducing oversteer, and you can go a little bit faster through there like that. About 1 car length before the 100 meter board, you're going to hit the brakes. Brake as heavy as you can in a straight line. You're going to get all the way down to 2nd gear before turning in, and you're not going to turn in before you get past the orange and blue barrier that's on the left. Notice I'm still braking 100% as I continue to turn into the corner. We're only going to come off as we get really close to the apex, freeing up the grip in the front tires, and then switching back to 2nd gear as soon as we get really close to that apex, and you want to get on the throttle in one smooth motion without any oversteer. Move onto the curb for the next corner and take a look at this little dark spot towards the end of it. As soon as you get to that dark spot, you're going to brake sharply, then trail brake really quickly, coming entirely off the brakes as you finish the turning, trying to get as close to this barrier as you possibly can. You want to be on the throttle as early as possible too, and it's totally fine if you dip into the grass a little bit, as long as you don't go past that outside curb. Take note of the line I'm taking, that I'm going left here and then going right late so I can straighten myself out with the wall right after the barrier here. And at that left-hand turn sign, we're going to start turning in. Lift as you turn in and wait till you get to the end of this barrier here before you start braking. Brake at 100%, but note that will cause understeer. Once you get past this little kink, we're going to come off the brakes just slightly and then back at 100% so we can align ourselves to the left of this white line. At the end of this curve, we'll start turning in and we should be in 1st gear by that time. You'll need to brake heavily, but I've also found that coming entirely off the brakes for this specific corner is really important to get the car to float around the corner correctly so you can get as close to the apex as possible. When you get past this post, you're going to notice that there's kind of a crest and it's in a weird position on the track. Your car should understeer a little bit if you get on the throttle too early, and that will turn into oversteer, so you've got to be very careful and very patient when it comes to getting on that throttle. You should also be in 2nd gear. Notice how much I'm playing with the steering and the throttle to make sure that I don't induce any oversteer. Oversteer will absolutely kill your momentum right here. From here on out, you're going to be full throttle for a long time. Make sure you're already turning a little bit to the right when you come under this arch. Hug the wall here and make sure you're driving straight to the right side of the arch because that is going to be your turn-in point. You want to turn in late enough that you align yourself with the straight part of the track after this curve. The track marshal nearest to the barrier is your braking point. Brake in a straight line until you get past the triangular sign, and then you're going to turn in very gradually in 3rd gear. I should have turned in a little bit earlier and stayed on the brakes a little bit longer too, because you'll see that I'm very far away from the apex, and on top of that, when I got on the throttle, I had to hesitate, and I even went into the grass here. That cost me at least 1/10, if not 2/10. For the next corner, we're going to avoid using all of the curbing that's just past the normal side of the track, and right between the 100 and the 50 meter boards is where you're going to brake. Brake in a straight line past the 50 meter board, and when you get all the way past it, we're going to start turning in. Continue decelerating, downshifting to 1st gear to tuck yourselves all the way up onto that curb, then back to 2nd gear and be very careful with the throttle. Continue steering left. You want to make sure that you're about in the middle of the track when you get to the start of the sand here on the left. That's when you'll change direction and turn in. You should feel a little bit of understeer initially, and that is when you know that you should start lifting off the throttle a little bit and then short shifting up to 3rd gear to make sure that you hit this apex right here. Your car is going to want to slide here. Make sure you do not go full throttle too early, and if you do slide, correct it as soon as you can or you're going to lose a lot of time or possibly go off track. Setting up for the final corner, we're going to go full throttle, turning in at the end of that curb on the left, riding up onto this curb, and then lifting as we get to the left-hander. As you hit this inside curb, gently brake to start scrubbing off speed, and then once you're aimed a little bit to the left of where you want to turn in, then you hit full brake. This corner is very deceptive. Yes, you can definitely get more speed coming out of the final corner if you're aligned way more to the left, but you're going to waste way more time trying to slow down with all that momentum you've got than you would save by setting yourself up on the left. At the beginning of the curb here, we're going to turn in, and then as soon as we hit the apex, you want to shift up to third gear and track all the way out using as much of the blue as you can, making sure that your right tires don't go into the blue before the red and white portion of the curb though. After the final corner, hug the right side of the track and it's a straight shot to the end. Good luck. As I mentioned in the breakdown, it is actually possible to do a bit of a dirt drop slide by putting your inside tires on the grass on purpose right here, but if you're not really familiar with how to catch a slide, I wouldn't suggest trying it. You could, of course, just practice here, but yeah, unless you're really familiar with it, don't try that unless you're just in time trial. There are three main keys to these really slow corners. One is to make sure that you're hitting the apex and you're really tight on the corner. Two is carrying as much speed as you can by getting off the brakes as early as possible. And three is making sure that you do not slide the tires on exit, because that will cost you more time than anything. This upcoming corner is another one of the corners in this track where you can sacrifice the entrance to make sure you get a really good exit and carry a lot of momentum through it. And like I mentioned in the breakdown, there is a crest right at the apex, so make sure you're very, very gentle on both the steering and the throttle, or else you'll get oversteer and understeer, and that'll cause you to lose way too much momentum. I made an absolutely massive mistake by turning in too late here, and I also got on the throttle too early, probably got off the brakes too early too. And I think it probably cost me at least a tenth and a half, if not 2/10 or even more than that. So I definitely think a 39 is possible on this track. For this left-right combo, you're going to get oversteer. It's going to happen almost no matter what. In fact, if you're not getting any kind of oversteer, if you're not having to make corrections, you're probably actually going too slow, to be honest. Now, there's a limit to that. If you can actually feel the car jerking around and you actually really slide, then that's too much. But if you're just getting the car to dance a little bit, you're probably right where you need to be. And just like the other left-right combos on this track, you do not need to set yourself all the way up on the left for the final corner. It's going to make you lose a lot of time. You can, however, set up on the left for your very first entrance to the lap, but I wouldn't do that at the end of a lap. Since our race this week is race B, there is absolutely no strategy except for driving as fast as you possibly can the entire time. It's also only 4 laps, making it a very short race. It's not that much shorter than the usual race Bs, but still, it's only 4 laps, so you only have 4 chances to do each of these corners correctly. One thing that you're going to find very often in the short races is that people are very, very desperate. People in front are desperate to keep their position, and people anywhere besides the front are desperate to make overtakes because there's such a limited amount of time. You've got to make moves early, and so people are usually going for moves that they absolutely should not go for. That results in a lot of chaos, and this race is not any different. With the official season already underway in Nations and coming up this Wednesday on manufacturers, there are 4 top split drivers trying to build up their DR at the front right now. Knowing that, I thought the best possible position I could do would be 5th place. But even with 5th place starting in 15th, that is a lot of movement for a 4-lap race, so I wanted to get to work. With our good friend Outlaw in front in the powerful Jag, I thought that it might be a good thing just to follow him through, and then he got a little oversteer, so I decided I was going to go for a move, even though I usually wouldn't on T1 with him, and either way it didn't really matter because he got a beautiful line going into this corner. It's always really dangerous. People are going to be making lots of mistakes there, so you've got to check up. The guy behind me did not quite check up, and luckily neither of us got damaged though, so no harm, no foul. This right-hand kink is tough by itself, but when you're trying to deal with other traffic, it's going to be very difficult to try to avoid people. I gave Outlaw a bump there, thinking he was going to be totally fine, but I think I actually caused him to understeer a lot. The Jag does not handle quite as well as this one, and in high-speed sections like that, where you've got to really navigate the correct line, it can get really tough. I got really halfway lucky with the ghosts of that Mitsubishi. I still got damage, but it only bumped me for a second, so I kept some of my momentum, just not all of it. Damaged arrow slows you down and also makes your steering less effective, plus the lost momentum meant that we easily lost the position to Brown Beast. One thing to consider when you have damage is that you're going to have to go through a lot of the corners a lot slower, and when you come out of a corner slower, it's probably going to make it so your car doesn't handle quite the same way. So if you're on the edge of oversteer with any corners at normal speeds, then when you're going slower because of damage, it's going to be much worse. I tried to be really cheeky and sneak past the pug because he was slowing down to avoid that spun out car, but in the end I could not make anything stick. We had a pretty close battle right there, but all that rubbing right there wasn't anything bad. We both gave each other space. I almost pushed him into the dirt, but ended up moving. But because we were respectful of each other, I did end up getting a better line and a better exit, and on top of that, I also had the slipstream right here. It's important to note where you think people are going to be in front if you are trying to chase the slipstream, and so that really made all of the difference, being able to get the slipstream from King Ghidorah. And like I said before, when you're in these races, these short races, people are going to be desperate. We've seen 2 people spin out in just, I think, the past 3 corners, maybe even only 2 corners. It's also important to note that if you have slipstream down the back straight, you're going to have understeer on that fast left kink, so you're going to definitely want to go slower than you usually would. You're going to be going faster than you would on your own, and you'll need to go slower than you would on your own, so the amount of speed that you need to drop off is pretty drastic if you're used to time trialing here instead of racing. I suspect that Mugen had some damage here because he's kind of all over the place line-wise, and he wasn't able to get any grip despite having a wider line in that final corner. And that was a good thing too, because since I was able to get in front, I got the slip from King Ghidorah, and even if he had slipstream from me and he didn't have damage, he still wouldn't really be able to get far enough ahead to make any kind of move in this next corner, because the Aston is actually faster than the Porsche when they're both the slip. I didn't actually mean to go that wide, but it was fine because he still had space, but I should have just apexed early there. I braked too late trying to make sure that he wouldn't be able to pass me on the outside there, but we were both okay. Another major thing that you really want to pay attention to is how much people are going to slow down for the last couple corners. I treat it as a single corner, the right, left, and then right-hander, but a lot of people are actually going to lift off heavily on this first right-hander, even brake before the left-hander, so you've got to be ready for people to go a lot slower than you usually would going into that final sector. Now this was kind of iffy. It looked like King Ghidorah got a better exit than the Porsche, and that Ford GT is a lot faster than the Porsche, so I was worried that he was going to get all the way next to him and then they try to go too wide onto the first corner, but that didn't happen at all. Even though it's got a lot of straights, I think we can consider this track more of an acceleration track than a top speed track. The Ford GT is definitely faster in a really long straight than the Porsche, but I think the Porsche has just good enough acceleration and traction that it doesn't really lose out until after you've already got to start slowing down. MR cars are also known for being really sharp on the nose, being able to turn in really quickly. So all these really fast kinks like this, where you need to turn in and then get back on the throttle really quickly, those are really well navigated by any of the MR cars. The Aston to me is like the Porsche of the FR cars. It has incredible turn-in, incredible brakes, incredible traction, and it actually, I think it does have more power than the Porsche. So to me, I think it is superior in the end, but it is really difficult to really squeeze all that performance out compared to the Porsche. I think people have a much easier time with the Porsche than they do with the Aston. Or maybe people just use it more. Something I haven't mentioned in a while is driving with people that you trust. I knew that King Ghidorah probably wouldn't go for a crazy move that would slow both of us down. He'd probably go for a move if it was really obvious that he'd be able to easily take the position, but since it's him and I always really trust him, and I didn't feel the need to really defend there. If we don't defend and we trust the person behind not to attack, then we can both go a lot faster than if we're going to defend, whether or not he's going to attack or not. So I was 1.8 seconds behind the top 5, and all of them are top split drivers, including one World Tour driver, so I didn't expect to catch up to them within a single lap, but this is a tricky track, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I somehow quickly caught up to all of them. Okay, not all of them. I think Velosa was head and shoulders above everyone, but I did catch up to these two, and Rodrigo Lorenzo was only maybe just a second ahead of that. I tried to squeeze through, but I kind of knew it didn't work, so I knew if I gave one of them a bump, then I should be able to get in front of the other one, and it looked like Valesi had much better momentum, so I went for it. But, of course, collapse at a pace is not going to go down easy, and I made a big mistake right there, so I immediately lost the chance to pass him there. However, he also made a little bit of a mistake, and I knew if I braked really deep, he wouldn't be able to pass with Valesi there, and then we both got a little bit of oversteer, and unfortunately, he got a little bit too much. If you go back and you watch the radar, you'll see that we didn't actually touch. I think he was trying to avoid me because it was obvious that I was sliding, but he was also sliding at the same time, so he just kind of turned into the slide and went all the way off. I felt pretty bad about that. At the end right here, I was following Valesi, and I thought we might be able to get in front of Rodrigo Lorenzo, but then he gave him a bump. What was really interesting is at the end, he also just lifted to let me go. He didn't even try to take the position. I don't know if he thought that he blocked me when I tried to drive in between them, but That was a classy move, completely unnecessary, my friend, but I appreciated the gesture anyways. Somehow, we ended up in 4th place, starting from 15th and only 4 laps with 5 top split drivers at the front. So that, I consider, a very good example of why this is the anti-meta car of the week. As always, thank you very much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I do want to apologize for not live streaming as much. I do plan on live streaming actually even more. Unfortunately, I've had some involuntary, massive, life-changing events, and that means that I have had to take a bit of a break. And so I will be back, better than ever, I promise. And in the meantime, thank you very much to all my members who've been sticking with me, and please enjoy seeing your name on the next screen. Thank you.